as I just mentioned, more with Penelope in take 2. Thank you very much for the questions which have come in. We will put some of those to her later. We have talked around the film. Well, actually, Penelope, I wondered if she was going to talk about the whole film.
Yes, she did. There's no need to do a plot synopsis because she did a brilliant accounting of the plot of the film. I have to say, she stopped short of Tom Courtenay only talking about the final scene of 45 Years, literally leaping in by saying, well, of course, at the end, that happens.
He did, yes, that was one of those moments where I don't think you're...
That's right, Tom.
Do you not know that... Oh,
there is a whole other film before the end.
For a while. Yeah.
Anyway, but I thought it was that sort of stopped in exactly the right place. So... It's the first thing that I thought of when I started watching Harold Fry was two things. Firstly was the Werner Herzog story. Do you know this story? So Werner Herzog walked from Munich to Paris 3 weeks through ice and rain because he had heard that his mentor, Lotte Eisner, was ill. And he had said he was going to do the walk with the sole belief that as long as he was walking, then, death would not come calling. And it's a very, very famous Herzog story. And I wondered whether that was somewhere in the background of this story, because it is a very well-known and well-rehearsed story.
And that's certainly what Jim Broadbent's Harold Fry is
precisely
saying.
While
he keeps walking, Hattie will stay
And
alive.
as he walks, he says, I will not die, or she will not die, you will not die. He repeats this to himself as a kind of mantra because he's not somebody who walks regularly, and he's kind of walking through the pain. His shoes are falling apart. His feet are in terrible condition. I was thinking of the thing with Eddie Izzard doing her marathons, day after day after day, and by the time it got to the 30th one or the 24th one, her feet were in pieces. But so on the one hand, I had Herzog in my mind, and on the other hand, I had that Tim Spall film, The Last Bus. If you remember, the way The Last Bus works is that it's somebody who has lost their wife and is traveling the length of the country on local buses. And during the course of that, they are picked up by social media and they become a kind of local hero, although, out of the way. So there are those two kind of weird connections. There's also... And again, this was an odd connection. I started thinking about Life of Brian, because the central character of Harold Fry in The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry is an atheist. He does not appear to believe in fact, he says, very specifically, he doesn't have those beliefs. And yet he picks up these followers who start wearing T-shirts that say pilgrims. And there is a kind of element, because The Life of Brian is a serious film as well as being one of the funniest films ever made. It is a serious film, but don't follow me. I'm not the Messiah. And I thought there was a little bit of that going on in the background, which I think is a particularly, well, to my sensibility, that feels like a particularly kind of British isn't the right word, but there is a particular kind of sensibility about the slightly befuddled character suddenly picking up followers and going, why are you coming? Because of course what happens is a young man comes along who sort of starts to function as a surrogate son, because he thinks maybe I can help this young man in a way that I couldn't help my own son. And then I was thinking, what's really interesting is I'm thinking about all these things while I'm watching the film. So therefore, it's touching a number of different nerves, because I love it when things kind of, settle. Because it is, on the one level, a fairly straightforward, small, British film about somebody walking the country. We have the songs by Sam Lee, which are absolutely beautiful, really, really beautiful, and the Ionescu score. And those songs are used. I mean, actually, when I was at your house last night, we played one of them, and it was, I think they work really well. And then, of course, we have the sights of England. So you have, yes, the some of the greenery, but there's a lot of motorways. There's a lot of rain. There's a lot of drizzle. And then when you finally, the moment of walking past the Angel of the North, which I don't care which film it's in, whether it's purely Belter or whatever it is, every time I see the Angel of the North on screen, a little part of me cries, because I think it's one of the most beautiful statues. And I thought it was quite clever the way in which the film lets you imagine a backstory that you fill in the blanks, and it doesn't reveal its hand until fairly late on. I haven't read the book, and I'm not sure whether the book does a similar thing about you're quite a long way in the story before you actually realise what the story with the son is, what the story with Queenie is, what the story with his wife is, because there's a key moment in which his wife says it hasn't been a marriage for 20 years, but you're not entirely sure what that means. And so I was kind of impressed by how it snuck under it got under my skin without me really realizing that it was doing it. And that made me think, okay, well, this is a well-crafted drama. Obviously, the source material is very, very solid. And the fact that the script is written by Rachel Joyce, working from her own book and adapting it herself. But I think it works because it looks beautiful. I do think the cinematography is great. I think the cinematography does that thing about the grimness and the splendor of real life at the same time, that you can be walking along a pavement with your shoes in pieces and it's miserable, but there is something else going on. And at the very end of the film, it goes a little bit magical realist. But I thought it was well done, and I thought the point that Penelope Wilton made about it never overplays it. People don't get to do big stand-up speeches. People don't get to do big, Sermon on the Mount things. I thought that worked.
Well, and a lot of it, as she said, it's about the kindness of strangers, and an awful lot of it is.
Yes.
And the healing power that has.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the more I think about it, the more it has it has depth that I didn't really realize at the time. As I said, the fact that it reminded me of Werner Herzog, The Last Bus, and Life of Brian. And none of those in a bad way, all of those in a good way, was kind of interesting.
And I think the spirit of the book, if there are millions of people who've enjoyed the book.
You've read it,
yes,
yeah.
And will feel as though the spirit of the book is absolutely in this movie, and which is not a surprise, as you mentioned, because Rachel Joyce did this, did the screenplay. But the casting is perfect here. I sometimes wanted more. The Kind Strangers I could have done more with.
Okay,
I think, and I wasn't quite convinced that. I mean, LK puts in an incredible performance, as Penelope says. Wasn't quite convinced that he was their son at any stage. But anyway, a recommendation from both of us, I think we're saying.
Interesting thing as well with the director, who did 6 episodes of Normal People. I mentioned that the DP did Quiet Girl. And then way back in the Radio 1 days of 1996, Hetty MacDonald directed Beautiful Thing, which is a really lovely British film and actually very radical at the time. And that's a film which is well worth checking out. If you enjoyed this, go back and seek out Beautiful Thing from 1996.
So that's The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. As we mentioned before, more with Penelope Wilton, your questions coming up. Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's Take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would. I have done.
Excellent.